So are we live streaming now?
What do you?
Are we live streaming? I'm just trying to figure out. Am I live streaming or no? It doesn't look like I am streaming. Oh, I am. Okay, I am streaming. Okay, cool. Alright, so let's get the volume thingy set up with my headset. Oh, still playing. Still got it playing. Alright. Oh, is it just gonna work?
You mean by have I?
Alright, so it is working. I guess how well can you hear me? Because the issue is I'm not trying to have it pick up this, Okay, I am streaming. Okay, cool. Alright, so let's get the volume thingy set up. I guess we can try this. How well can you hear me? Because the issue is I'm not trying to have to pick up this. I am streaming. I guess how well can you hear me? Because the issue is I'm not trying to have to pick up this. Okay, so I could go yodelee, yodelee, yodelee. And I could do this.
Read students. So is there a certain book, article, whatever it is that you would?
Okay, so I could go yodelee, yodelee, yodelee. That's fine, I guess. I can do this.
Read students. So is there a certain book, article, whatever it is that you would?
Maybe I could turn up the volume for this a little bit more. Alright, I think that's good. That's fine, I guess. Let's see what the fan sounds like, though. You can hear the fan pretty clear as day. I mean, let me stand out here. Maybe I can turn up the volume. I think I should turn it down slightly. Turn it down slightly, try and not hear the fan as much. Yo, yo, yo. I wonder if I could make it so, like, the audio's way higher. I think I should turn it down slightly. Turn it down slightly, try and not hear the fan as much. Yo, yo, yo. I wonder if I could make it so, like, the audio's way higher. I think I should turn it down slightly. Turn it down slightly, try and not hear as much. Sync offset, what does that mean? Oh, is that how it comes off? Oh, no way, that would be so sick. Sync offset, what does that mean?
So you want to become...
What? Yeah. Sync offset for audio with OBS. Oh, definitely don't want to do that. Dang, I thought there was like a way to like increase it for the stream. Okay, let's see. Oh, you can add a noise gate. Oh, wait, there's just audio output? Is that a thing? Right? Yo? Yo? What is audio output? Hello? Um... Yo? Oh, maybe this is, filters? noise gate. So, oh, at this point, oh, it's working already. Yo, this is sick. Hello? 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 I don't know if this works or how to do this. Explain it again. Set this just above the noise alert close threshold. Yo. Oh, I see. Okay, so I want this to be at like maybe 30. Hello? 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 Other way? Hello? 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 Okay, so what I'm thinking is basically... This is so interesting. Hello? Oh, I see. So I want it more like there. Hello? Hello? Yo, this is so sick. So it's not picking up the fan? Oh, it is? So then I turn this to here. Hello? 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 Alright, we'll try that. Oh, this is actually insane. Then if I play this...
Be interested? Sure. Sorry, because I was having issues, I'm on my phone, so the printing is like very, very, very small. Why isn't it sufficient for an eternal omniscient substance to not reveal the details of? I'm not sure I even understand the question. Right. So, I guess.
Okay, cool. Alright, let's go through this.
Still has to grasp
Turn this down a little bit.
onto something. It still has to track to an analogical concept. And I started looking at my relationship with my children as sons, and I started looking at things like Luke 11, where you have statements that, even though you're evil, you still know how to give good gifts to your children.
Well, ChatGPT.
So the analog between God as a loving father and me as a father.
All right, so these were my previous notes. I learned that I actually like a different argument a lot more than the divine hiddenness argument. And so before I just bail and start going to that other argument, I do want to see if I can figure out if the divine hiddenness argument is valid or not. And sort of like yeah, like I just want to figure out if the divine hiddenness argument works before I go to this one, because I do think this argument's really strong. A lot of people say the reason for like, when I say evil, I don't even mean like evil in the ordinary sense. I just mean like anything that's not perfect. Like, think of whatever you want as perfect, like maximal experience. The reason that maximal experience does not exist, or just even if you just whatever God says is perfect, his like standard for perfection, like if we use that, right? If he just started with his perfection, a lot of theists would say, right? It's just 10 points, right? And then as time goes on, then it stays at 10 points, right? Because there's no reason for it to improve. And then he says, okay, well, how about if we start at 0, then the virtues that you get as good overcomes the evil, then you'll go from 0, which is the worst, the badness. As good overcomes it, you go to 20 because you experience all these amazing virtues with good overcoming evil, which is what God really wants. And I'm saying you could get all of those good virtues by just always having them instilled in people. Like, those virtues do not have, like, the good feelings, those good virtues aren't foundational, I guess, is maybe more of what I'm saying, and that they point to something else. So for example, like you sacrificing yourself to save someone else, right, is like a great virtue that everybody would look at. It's like, that's super good, that's like maximal experience or whatever, right? Well, if you dig deeper on what is actually occurring when that happens, what is the thing that's sacrificing, like what's the goodness that comes out as a result of this, it's deeper than him sacrificing himself, and whatever it is, I'm not entirely sure what it is, I have to think about it a lot more, but whatever that goodness that comes from that can be achieved without the sacrificial part. That's a way to get at that, but it's not necessary for the good to come as a result. I guess maybe a better example would be like I don't know why this is the first example that popped in my head, but I'll try to come up with a better example. Raising your kid, right? You might think, oh my god, that's a fly. I thought that was like a dust or something that I caught in my hand. You might think that raising your kid, you have to discipline it, right? You have to discipline it. You have to discipline the kid. And so you have to make it go through suffering. You have to make the child go through suffering, so that it will have a better overall experience, right? Well, the only reason you want it to mature, you want it to grow, all these things, right? The only reason that you are punishing the child is so that it will come with so that it will mature into that child that it should be. But what if you could use good means, perfect means, by treating the child well and making the child go through good things and rewarding the child and not punishing the child whatsoever. And you get to that perfect means the same way. So in both situations, the child matures into the person that you want it to be. One is through punishment and one is through rewarding. One is through just negative experience, but it builds to the positive experience. Whereas rewarding is just positive experience and it builds to continuous positive experience. And so it's just positive experience the whole time. It seems very clear that the rewarding, the positive experience the whole time would be preferable. And so that's what I'm saying with this. A lot of people assume that God has, in order to get that perfect world, God had to go use punishment to get to that amazing, to mature the world in the way that he wants. You assume you go from punishment to the perfectly mature world, when in reality, you could just have the perfectly mature world the whole time. And punishment in and of itself is only good in so as much as it brings the means. And I think this is like so agreeable for so many people. It would be, I feel like you had to be like the most debate bro, like to try and argue that punishment is good. Like, yeah, you'd have to argue that like the punishment is the good part. Because at the end of the day, like the virtues and all that stuff are just like brain states and stuff like that that can just exist. Because if God has like a futuristic, all-encompassing worldview that you can see past, present, and future, then all you have to do is pick the human being from the future state that went through all the suffering, pluck him out of there, put him in the world, and now he exists in the world at time equals 0. But he has all of those amazing traits that you would think would come from the 0 to 20, but he starts off at 20. And so if God can do this, then he can create us in such a way that we never go through the 0 to 20, but we just start off with the brain states and the psychological state where we are just at 20. Perfection. And it seems like God can figure out a way, like this isn't like, maybe there are some things that need to be explained for this to work, but it seems like this is just such a thing that God could work out. If God could do literally anything he wants, God could create the rules of how things work, where this would just be so much more preferable in accomplishing his goals. And the fact that we don't see this in the universe is a clear argument against the fact that God exists, because, or this version of God at least exists, because this is just not everywhere we see in the world. We see lack of perfection, and so everything we see is an argument against the God of the Bible. So, but that argument, right? I think is super strong. Obviously, I need to think about it more because I haven't thought about it that much. But this is kind of what this guy was getting at. He's the non-Christian. But I'm trying to just assume. I don't even know what I have to assume, but part of the divine hiddenness is an internal critique. So, it's an internal critique. And so the question is, what are you assuming? Because if it's an internal critique, you're assuming something. So what are we assuming? And what are we not assuming, I guess? Are we assuming everything? Because, like, so, like, if we were trying to make a deductive argument, I guess, we would have to assume everything in the Bible. So are we just assuming the Bible, and then we're looking at reality? Is that what the Bible says, and then we look at reality? Is that true? Or are we assuming reality as well? It seems like, we are assuming reality, or sorry, we are assuming the Bible is true, and then looking at the world and seeing if the two are congruent. Why did it go over here? Is that it? So this is where I go like to ChatGPT, right? I can use this shit for everything. Use it to figure out my audio, and it worked really well. I think. We'll hope. I'll see when this thing is done. But I would go and I would be like, in a internal, when you are doing an internal, or what? I'll just say, what is an internal critique? Something. Give me an example. A simple example. Treat all review how the company implements this policy. If the company give bonuses only to employees, it could be seen as a contradiction. Or the weekend employees does not account for the personal preferences. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think I understand more now. This is better. I feel like I have a better understanding. So we are assuming everything for the internal critique. We are literally assuming everything. So for my contradiction, it would seem God wants all to be saved. Not all are saved. Claims to love all. Not all are saved. So he could use hiddenness. I think I guess I would agree that the argument doesn't really work. The real argument is this that people I think are saying. Either that God claims to want everybody saved and they're not saved, or God claims to love all and they're not saved. It's not that God claims to love all and he's hidden. This isn't necessarily a contradiction, or it doesn't seem to be a contradiction. Like divine hiddenness, this would be a separate argument. So the hiddenness argument would say God wants all to be saved and he's hidden. God claims to love all and he's hidden. And when it says divine hiddenness, it's not because it seems like hiding, like when you're playing hide and go seek, you know that someone exists. You know that they're there. You just know that they're hiding from you. That you don't have access to them. That's not really what the divine hiddenness is saying. Hiddenness is saying that we don't even know that there is someone even hiding. There is someone hiding. Which is, I think I have heard of someone say this before, but it never really clicked in my brain. But you would think with hiddenness that it just means that they are not accessible. But this is saying that we don't even know that there's someone to access. Sort of. I guess for some people, they would, you kind of assume they exist. There's two versions. There's the one person who, I guess they don't really know. But they think there might be someone hiding and they can't access them. Or could also say, I guess, there could be two things. Okay. It could say those two things, I think. So this would be a different, separate argument. Hiddenness argument. Is there a way I can like color code that or something? Nope. Okay. Alright, cool. Alright, so I guess we could start with this. So I am trying to see, I'm trying to answer this. I'm trying, because I think he does this a lot and I do this a lot, is I go to this argument. It's like I'm kind of going back and forth. He's hidden, but it seems like, well, I'm more so arguing this. It seems like, but let's see.
Still an analog, but it should.
We'll see,
the fact that
like
he's
how
coming from more
how
of a
often we
theist
keep
position.
switching.
And so what we're going to do, how we're going to structure this, is that we're going to allow Tyler to present his case for divine hiddenness, and then we're going to allow Mike Jones.
I guess I do want to record this. Because I'm doing a video for today explaining kind of what's going on in my routine, I guess, a little bit. So I'll do one of these numbers. After that, and then I will be working on a divine hiddenness video. I'm working on a divine hiddenness video. So I'm doing research for it right now. I'm actually live streaming as we speak. And I will be basically trying to learn as much as I can about the argument, so I can explain it really well through a video, steelman the argument, and then give my thoughts on what the argument is. So yeah, I still haven't ate yet today. So when my brain needs a break from this, because when I get into things like this, usually I can't last that long, maybe an hour before my brain just gets fried because I'm thinking so like a lot about it. My brain's like on full drive trying to understand everything. So, I will be. Oh, I need to talk without the earphone in. What was I saying? So I'll be working on this, and then once my brain gets fried, then I'll get something to eat, and then probably come back to this, and then probably do that for the rest of the day. Maybe I'll like organize some videos, put them in the right spot. Since I'm working on multiple videos, since I record a lot for each of the videos each day, I'll like organize each of the files with what videos I recorded that day, put them in the right spots, so I keep everything organized. I might do that today. I might do that tomorrow. I'm not sure. But then I'll be before bed. After I finish this, I'll start working on like lucid dreaming stuff, learning about lucid dreaming, and then do my little nightly routine with lucid dreaming, and then I will be going to sleep. And hopefully, in the morning, I will dream journal about a lucid dream. I'll be sick. Okay.
To go into his understanding or his case for divine hiddenness, and then we're going to go to more of an open discussion, and that open discussion is going to last about 60 minutes or so, and then we're going to have some Q&A from the audience. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
All right, Tyler, I want you to start us off, man. Go ahead, just give us a rundown of your concerns or your thoughts on divine hiddenness.
Yeah, so I mean, this is geared much more towards a discussion. So this isn't long prepared opening statements from either of us, and I'm very happy to be discussing this with Michael. I've been a big fan of his and enjoyed our conversations that we've had in the past. A lot of times on the same side, talking about some of the same people we've debated. As many know, recently, a little less than a year ago, I came out officially as no longer a Christian, so I formally apostatized from the Christian religion, although I'm still a theist. And one of the big reasons for that was because that I did find there are lots of reasons. They all kind of dovetail together. But one of them was this issue of divine hiddenness. Now, as it goes through this, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, well, Tyler, you're still a theist, right? So how do you as a theist explain it? And I will readily admit I don't have answers for lots of these things. I'm still exploring. I'm still seeking and trying to understand. I think that there's reasons to believe that there is a God that are unrelated to this. However, I found that a lot of what came up in problems of divine hiddenness, problems of suffering, problems of evil, and things like that were made much more stark and much stronger.
Just thinking off the bat, I think the hiddenness argument might be, the question really is, like, maybe the big question is, does God want to be known by everyone? That's the question. Because if he doesn't, and this really depends on what we mean by hiddenness, but if he doesn't, then, or if it seems like the answer to this question is no, then the argument doesn't really work.
Under a biblical or a Christian position. And that's for numerous reasons. And I should also say that there were lots of other reasons. So this was part of many other reasons that I came to think that biblical Christianity just was false. I could say more on that at other times. So we're going to focus on divine hiddenness. For me, the main issue of divine hiddenness is that it runs up against the biblical concept that God
I wonder what
is
the live
love.
stream looks like.
Not merely that God is loving, not merely that God does loving things, but that God is by nature love. And that God, and as part of what that means is that God wants to have a redemptive, saving relationship with his creatures. And what that does when you put those things together with divine hiddenness, what shakes out to me is it feels like a more pointed problem.
I guess I can make this a little bit bigger. And I could somehow hide this bar. That doesn't look very good. Wait, how do I hide this? I thought there was a way to hide this. Before it took me a minute to figure it out, but there's definitely a way to hide. There we go. There we go. Okay. And then, can we zoom in anymore? Okay, and then what does this look like? Can I hide this? I just want to get rid of this chat, but it like stays there. But it's okay, I guess. There's gotta be a way I can get rid of this, right? I think it does look better like this, though. But you really can't see much of the live stream. Cut out a lot. I mean, you're just seeing the top of his head, though. Like, how much is that? Yeah, it's not much you're losing. I guess this is fine.
Than simply with theism, where theism doesn't have some of the eschatological concerns about divine relationship. It doesn't have some of this concept of God being by nature love, right? Things along those lines. So when I started thinking about divine hiddenness, and I said, okay, well, when I was as a Christian, I was experiencing divine hiddenness. When I looked around unbelievers, they were experiencing divine hiddenness. When we were looking at the types of things we see in the Bible where God showed up. Now, I don't want to get the impression that I expect that if God exists, he would show up like a magic cosmic butler, or that he would show up like a vending machine, or that he'd have to answer every single prayer, or anything along those lines. But when it's pitched as a relationship with a loving father, that language about God, even though it's analogical, still has to grasp onto something. It still has to track to an analogical concept. And I started looking at my relationship with my children as sons, and I started looking at things like Luke 11, where you have statements that, even though you're evil, you still know how to give good gifts to your children. So the analog between God as a loving father and me as a father should be direct. Still an analog, but it should still be direct.
I wonder if we
And
can get
started
rid of
looking around
this.
at the way that God was hidden, especially to his own people, his own children, whether or not you're a Calvinist or non-Calvinist, his own people, Christians, believers, on all accounts are his children. And yet God is hidden in ways that we wouldn't expect if God was a loving father in a meaningful sense. Right? Imagine that my sons came to me and they said, they didn't even come to me. They came to other people and they said, we don't even know that our dad loves us. We don't experience his love. He's not around. He doesn't always provide for us. We don't think that he loves us. And because that, we're going to go wander into the freeway and get hit by oncoming traffic. Right? Sounds a little extreme, a little gruesome. But if you think about the apostate, if you think about someone like me, I was someone who loved.
Sorry, it's really hard for me to focus with this. Let's try this. Oh, for real? Can I hide? Oh, fuck. Okay. So if I do this, inspect, hide element.
So what do you mean by have I read C.S. Lewis? Is there a certain book, article, whatever it is that you would be interested in? Sure.
Yeah,
Sorry,
what? I didn't know
because
you
I
could
was
do
having
this.
issues, I'm on my phone, so the printing is like very, very, very small. Why isn't it sufficient for an eternal omniscient substance to not reveal the details of? I'm not sure I even understand the question. Right. So I guess my answer, if I understand the question right, and one of you maybe correct me if I'm understanding it wrong. I, I'm not saying that God should or is somehow obligated or it'd be best for him to reveal everything. Right? That would just be. I mean, that would be an obscenely aggressive and strong, bold claim to make. I don't think that would be that's not the claim that I'm making or the argument that I'm making that he should. It just seems to me that there are trivial ways that God could be less hidden. That would, if God is by nature love, if salvation is a main ends of him, even if soul building is a main ends, it seems that there are just trivially easy ways to conceive of God being less hidden and to accomplish those ends better. So that's really what the claim is.
All right, Mike, any thoughts?
Nah.
All right. We have a super chat here from Chris. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate the support. Mr. Chris Date. Hope all is well with you, brother. Hope all's well. All right. So we got a question here, and this is for Mike Jones. I was so impressed by your performance here. Thanks for defending the faith so well. I love your Lord of the Rings and Inception analogies. I'd love to collaborate on something, given our many differences. Let me know.
Yeah, I love Chris. I think he's great. Yeah, I'd love to collaborate on something. Just message me. You know how to message me, man. I do. Messenger is probably the best when it comes to because I think we're Facebook friends. So yeah, just message me.
Did I fuck up everything? Oh shit, I want to watch that. Um, wait, what? Why can't I see my history?
Just message me if you got any ideas. I'd love to. Yeah, because So yeah, I'm really honored by that. Sure, be glad to.
All right, all right. Well, I'm sure you ain't got nothing to add on to that, Tyler. So we're good. We're good.
I would just say, I would love to see you two on the same side of debate. I've said for years, I think Chris Date is one of the best, if not the best, debaters that Christian academics have.
Oh well, this is fine. Like, does this matter that much? No, it does not. I just wanted to see if I could figure it out. But, oh well.
have.
Of suffering a Christian response.
All right, so that's it. You guys have the floor for
Hiddenness, what shakes out to me is it feels like a more pointed problem than simply with theism, where theism doesn't have some of the eschatological concerns about divine relationship. It doesn't have some of this concept of God being by nature love, right? Things along those lines. So when I started thinking about divine hiddenness, and I said, okay, well, when I was as a Christian, I was experiencing divine hiddenness. When I looked around unbelievers, they were experiencing divine hiddenness. When we were looking at the types of things we see in the Bible where God showed up. Now, I don't want to get the impression that I expect that if God exists, he would show up like a magic cosmic butler, or that he would show up like a vending machine, or that he'd have to answer every single prayer, or anything along those lines. But when it's pitched as a relationship with a loving father, that language about God, even though it's analogical, still has to grasp onto something. It still has to track to an analogical concept. And I started looking at my relationship with my children as sons, and I started looking at things like Luke 11, where you have statements that, even though you're evil, you still know how to give good gifts to your children. So the analog between God as a loving father and me as a father should be direct. Still an analog, but it should still be direct. And started looking around at the way that God was hidden, especially to his own people, his own children, whether or not you're a Calvinist or non-Calvinist, his own people, Christians, believers, on all accounts are his children. And yet God is hidden in ways that we wouldn't expect if God was a loving father in a meaningful sense. Right? Imagine that my sons came to me and they said, they didn't even come to me, they came to other people and they said, we don't even know that our dad loves us. We don't experience his love. He's not around. He doesn't always provide for us. We don't think that he loves us. And because of that, we're going to go wander into the freeway and get hit by oncoming traffic. Right? Sounds a little extreme, a little gruesome. But if you think about the apostate, if you think about someone like me, I was someone who loved God, loved his word, was dedicated in ministry, did all of those types of things. Again, not saying that the works are what save you, but I wanted that relationship. I was seeking that relationship. I was engaging in daily prayer. I was memorizing scripture. I was doing all of those relationship building things for decades. I was able to come and say that I don't feel God in any meaningful sense. He's not present. I'm not seeing any difference in my life compared to those others in the sense of answered prayers.
I am hungry, but my brain's not gassed yet. I think I do need to keep pushing. Get used to the hungry feeling, maybe. Because eating definitely does make it harder to focus for the show. So does being hungry, but I think being hungry you can get over. Well, I mean, I guess you could get over too, but I think I'd rather get over the hungry one.
When it comes to getting blessings and jobs or whatever it is, people who don't believe have the exact same types of success rates, things along those lines. And God knew that if nothing happened, that I would apostatize. And if Christianity is true, that means eternal damnation, whatever that means, eternal conscious torment, annihilation, whatever it is, unless the universalist is right, which I don't think biblically is sound. He knew that would be the outcome, and yet still did nothing. Right? If my sons made that type of statement, I would do everything in my power. Again, this isn't saying like, I'd give them a Mercedes because they asked for a Mercedes, but I would make myself known. I would make myself present. I would be available. I all those types of things. A Damascus Road experience would be fantastic, something along those lines. So there are lots and lots of ways. I mean, it's almost trivially easy to think of ways that God can make himself present and known to his children in ways that the normal theodicies and the normal explanations don't touch. So the other flip side of this was I found that things like the free will theodicy or the free will defense or soul building or those types of answers didn't actually explain the issue. They weren't what I call answers even in the right direction. They didn't scratch where the problem itched. And so I found not only were there issues of hiddenness where we wouldn't expect hiddenness, and hiddenness was in such a way that it would mean that the analog of God being a loving father, if that's God being a loving father, it's in a way that as a human father would be unloving and unfatherly. And so it makes that analog break down, right? So it makes it so that if love can be expressed in ways that are unloving, I don't know what it means to say that God is love anymore. If it can be broken down in ways where the father is unfatherly, I don't know what the analogy means anymore that God is father. So it breaks down the language about God as a loving father. And then it does it in ways that are not overcomable or surmountable by the standard theodicies and resolutions that were provided. So that's just my general, general statement of what the overall thrust of this type of problem was. So.
All right, cool. Thank you, Tyler, for giving us that understanding. All right, Mike, you're up to sort of present your understanding of divine hiddenness. All right, Mike, you have the floor.
Okay, yeah, I'm not going to try not to go super long. I'll try to go about the same length as Tyler did, which I think was about 10 minutes or so. So, in his interview on Myth Vision, Tyler mentioned that divine hiddenness is really like an internal critique of Christianity. And I think that's absolutely true. I think that's kind of how the argument is presented. Now, Tyler talked about his own personal experience. I can't make this about him because I don't have access to his mental states, and I don't like psychoanalyzing people, especially non-believers, so I'm going to avoid that. But there are plenty of issues I see with arguing from divine hiddenness that I want to go through. So he talked about God being a loving father, but he doesn't act like a typical human father. And I agree, but that's also because God is far more than that, has far more in view in terms of eternity, omniscience, seeing multiple planes of existence, which I hope we can talk about. But we also need to remember that I think
I don't have any issue with that. So I guess his first point was what's the word? There's got to be an all-encompassing word that's just like more transcendent, like outside of time, like of his because of his godlike attributes. We would expect different behavior.
he brought up free will, for example. I think that's part of it, but it's not the full story. I think what is more important when it comes to divine hiddenness is the nature of sanctification, which scholars and philosophers like Paul Moser talk about. So let's talk about when God first came to his people. We don't have to go all the way back. Let's start with the Exodus. Jesus comes as a pillar of fire. He does all sorts of miracles. And what happens? Well,
Okay, I think part of I have to understand what sanctification means. Specifically, horoscope. So becoming holy, and then he also uses this word. What was the other thing he says?
the people groan, they rebel, they use him until they get what they need: freedom, food, land, and then they immediately start worshiping other gods. It didn't really generate the type of sanctification, the type of love God would truly want. So God comes again at another time for part of his will, not necessarily to remove divine hiddenness, but because of his will. He comes as the man Jesus Christ. And what do? Well, we see in the Gospel of John, some people try to forcibly make him a king, and others accuse him of casting out demons with Beelzebub, and they kill him, basically. Even his own disciples in Acts 1 didn't really understand fully what was going on. They said, "Are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel?" Again, it was always about them. So when God shows up, who can create things out of nothing from his bare hands, we don't love him in the way that we are supposed to in the agape sense. Because of our sinful nature, we tend to use him. We don't really come to him as we are supposed to. So those are the issues with God having just presenting basic theism. So to quote two scholars, Daniel Howard Snyder and Paul Moser, they say that God's desire for why people believe in his existence may well be much more important to him than that they believe in him in the first place. It may well be that God wants people to believe in his existence for certain.
God wants people to believe in him for the right reasons. And hiddenness. And achieve this. Basic theism. Which basic theism is just basic knowledge that God exists, and that's it. Theism.
Certain reasons and not for others. That he prefers that they do not believe at all if the only option is to believe for the wrong reasons. So that's important there. And so Paul Moser talks about God wants cognitively robust theism. That's exactly what he wants. Now he's responding to now. Before I get to that, I want to also point out that Schellenberg's argument assumes this idea that there are non-resistant non-believers. I have an issue, which I hope we can discuss about that later, because I don't think there really is good evidence there really are non-resistant non-believers, because that's just not how humans.
What's Schellenberger's argument again? Schellenberg, I guess. Reasonable non-belief does not occur. I guess I would disagree with premise too. Well, but I would agree with premise 4. Funny enough. Um. Um. Would we expect reasonable non-belief to occur if God's loving? I would not. I would not even. I would go as far to say I would not expect non-belief to occur. if God is loving.
Think about things. We are not purely rational creatures. We always have emotional reasons as well as rational reasons for our beliefs that we hold to. So my other issue is just not with sanctification. It's this idea that humans just don't simply operate that way. We always have emotional and logical reasons for why we take.
I do want to go into that because that's interesting. That's like a separate thing. I think that's not really relevant. Reasonable non-belief does not occur. That's like think about it later. Does reasonable non-belief occur? I don't know.
The beliefs that we do. And as I noted, God wants cognitively robust theism, not just basic theism. So he just doesn't want people to believe in him. He wants people to believe in him for the right reasons. So again, this philosophers I cited say this: if one believes that God exists on the basis of adequate evidence, just basic theism, that would not promote such moral transformations, maybe. Then bringing one to believe on the basis of such evidence would not serve God's purposes. So in general, God would manifest his perfect love by refusing to bring people to believe unless they were sincerely open to such moral transformations. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to this, is that this idea that God wants to create cognitively robust theism. Now, if we look out into the world, we can see that God can do that now with many Christians without providing his undeniable evidence of his presence for the whole world. So he doesn't need to use basic theism to get people to cognitively robust theism. He can use other means to sort of generate that. Next, people often assume they understand their motives. We all do this. I can tell you, if I would have gotten half of what I wanted when I was 20, I would be miserable right now. I once was talking to a friend who went through a divorce, and I asked, why did you get divorced? I thought you were in love. And he said, I thought I was, and I thought that was the one, but I realized when I finally got that, I was really just in love with the idea of marriage, not marriage itself. And so people often say, like, if I just got enough evidence, I would believe. But we are assuming, based on our limited information, that that is actually what would happen. It may not necessarily be the case. Often we go through these different cycles, these different changes. Let me give you an analogy. So I get up to 50 messages a day across all my platforms. And for the most part, I've stopped responding to people. I don't answer everybody's questions anymore. And it's not just because I don't have enough time, that's a big part, but I realize with me engaging with these people all day, they're not becoming rational, critical thinkers. They're just coming to me and they're using me as their secretary. So I answer their question about Genesis and they go, oh, good, he solved it. The next day they got another problem. Well, let me just go back to IP. He'll answer it for me again. And so they just become dependent on me and they just keep coming back to me. I want my followers to be critical thinkers. So I've had to become hidden to some degree, because if I make myself more available, they just end up using me as their piggy bank of answers, not because they really want to become a critical thinker, to become their own thinker. They just assume that because I've given them answers, they're just going to keep coming to me and coming to me. So I've had to cut it off. God could have a lot of the same motives if he understands that if he was more in people's lives because of our sinful nature, that we would use him and we wouldn't really come to him for the loving reasons that he truly desires. So that's something to keep in mind. And so God, of course, what he gives us is the gospel, where we see Jesus on the cross, and we have nothing but his love before us is the reason we come to Christ. Jesus says in the parable of the rich man in hell, if they will not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not listen even if someone were to rise from the dead. This general idea that more evidence isn't going to necessarily convince. There is enough sufficient evidence that he has given for us. And that is what will actually generate.
He's just restating point 2, I think.
Seeing God's actual love before us. Now, let's just say, for the sake of the argument, there are non-resistant non-believers. But given God's actual knowledge, he may have good reasons for denying giving them enough evidence. So Jacobus Erasmus and Timothy Stratton present this in their paper. and give arguments as to why God could actually delay giving evidence to non-resistant non-believers. They use the analogy of a guy in France. If God were to convert him now, he'd become a Christian, but that's it. But if God waits 10 years, he'll start a missionary in Africa. So given God's omniscience and his vast understanding of all the knowledge out there, he may very well have good reasons for delaying evidence if non-resistant non-believers exist. To quote, "For all we know, the actual world is the best feasible freedom-permitting world, even with its moral, natural, and gratuitous evils, as well as its divine hiddenness. For example, it is possible that the actual world is the one feasible freedom-permitting circumstance where evil is ultimately defeated and all who are not trans-world damned are saved. If this specific feasible maximal harvest world exists, then a perfectly wise and loving God would either create it, no matter how much finite suffering, evil, or divine hiddenness existed, or refrain from creating for creation altogether. It is possible, therefore, to be the best feasible world. However, it is also possible that there are an infinite range of feasible world tied for the status of being the best. An omniscient God is in a position to know." Now, let's talk about the idea of what if a non-resistant non-believer dies without getting the evidence they need? Well, God could have good reasons. Maybe they become like Steve Anderson or the Westboro Baptist Church, or become like Kenneth Copeland. And people always bring up Hebrews 9:27, and just as it was appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, but we also remember verse 28. So Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly awaiting for him. So he's coming to save those eagerly awaiting for him. I think that would include non-resistant non-believers if they exist, because they're eagerly waiting for the evidence to be saved. And we have to remember who's the judge. This is Jesus. Well, what did he say in John 9:41? He said to the Pharisees, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now you say we see, therefore your guilt remains." John 15:22. "If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin." So if non-resistant non-believers exist, then they have an excuse, and therefore Jesus says they would not necessarily be guilty. John Walton notes in the Old Testament that pagan nations are never condemned for idol worship. Now he says idols won't do you any good, they're a waste of time, but he doesn't condemn them like he condemns Israel. That gives us the indication that Israel was judged more strictly because they had more information. Ultimately, I think divine hiddenness fails to really map on the reality. That we need good evidence that non-resistant non-believers exist, and I think that we can't get to that from what we actually have. And I think that there is plenty in the Christian worldview to understand God as being just, and if he is just, he's going to judge people equally and fairly when that time comes.
All right, thank you so much, both of you guys, for just running down your thoughts and your positions on divine hiddenness. And so now we're going to transition to more of an open discussion where you guys will be able to tackle some of the issues and have a nice, fruitful discussion. All right, so that's it. You guys have the floor for about 60 minutes. And audience, as they traverse through this conversation, make sure you're getting your questions in, because there will be about a 30-minute Q&A after that. So you guys have the floor.
Thanks, Mike. I don't know if you wanna start first. If you had anything specific about mine, or if you want me to ask.
I mean, I'm always. I could respond to your issue.
I think that. Yeah. So I think that. One of the things that I've noticed, and this comes up with a lot of the theodicies, is that they come across, to me at least, and I hope this doesn't sound, condescending or anything. It reminds me of this type of answer. I call it a thief on the cross counterexample, right? And they're the kind that when people are talking about, well, what's necessary for salvation, everyone goes, oh, but what about the thief on the cross? And they find like the one exception to the paradigm. I find that a lot of theodicies do that. Right. So let me address one of the examples you gave, and then maybe that'll start the discussion.
Okay.
Right. So you start kind of with the
Hey,
idea.
Tyler.
Hey.
Okay. He's saying,
Tyler, before you go into that, hey Mike, your camera froze up Not sure what the heck was going on with it, but it looked like it froze up
Very
on you.
great thing.
I don't know.
I
Yeah,
want-
I can hear you. Everything sounds fine. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can
Yeah,
hear
we can
you.
hear
Yeah.
you. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my camera though, so I can look at it, but I don't know.
Okay. All right. Carry on.
Um, so, so you gave the example of the sanctification, right? And this idea was, well, um, God doesn't want to, He wants the cognitively robust beliefs, this cognitively robust relationship, and that we have these examples of God coming in the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, Jesus coming, giving bread, doing all his miracles. People still wanted it for the wrong reason and still crucified Jesus and all that kind of stuff. And so it's not a guarantee that if God manifests himself, that there'll be this one-to-one correlation to.
Okay, so he's saying every uh every every so one of Michael's points was revealing won't lead to I'll just call it CRT, cognitively robust theism. I know this is also critical. I think it's critical race theory, right? As well. But we're just gonna call it the same thing. Won't lead to CRT. So reveal to everyone. There are. So I guess he's kind of saying point granted. What about people? What about people? Who would? Is he saying these people don't exist?
A meaningful relationship, and that's fine. I guess where I come.
Honestly, I think I'm getting really hungry. What if I just ate while I watch this video? I'll try. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna start the food. I'll be back. I'm gonna start the food. I don't want to end the stream because I want it to be one long video. I guess I could edit it maybe, but I do want to I do want to get some food. I guess I'll be right back. Right back. Alright, that's got 15 minutes left. That's gonna be good. I'm excited for it. Alright, let's get back to work.
That strikes me kind of as like saying, well, some homeless people, if you offer support, are just going to abuse it and they're going to use it for drugs and alcohol anyways. So therefore, we shouldn't support most of them, right? That to me seems like a strange type of response, especially, and this is my last sentence. I know you'll have 100 things to say about this, and especially if I was omniscient, omnipotent, and the creator of the society, such that I could have created the society from the very get-go that there was no such thing as homelessness to begin with. Right? So it seems to me that part of what your answer also does is it's starting 100 miles downstream after the fall, after sin, after all that kind of stuff, when we could go back and say, okay, but God could have created a world without an initial covenant of works, without a tree of knowledge of good and evil. He could have stopped Satan from coming down and tempting them. He knew that was going to happen. Right? He could have done all these things that would have prevented the need for that type of work of redemption in the first place, and none of that would have violated freedom. I see no reason to think why you wouldn't have cognitively robust belief, because ostensibly, if the fall hadn't happened, Adam would have had cognitively robust belief. So I just that's some of the reasons why I find these types of answers unsatisfactory.
So yeah, interesting points. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know what's going on my camera. I tried to reset it. I don't know. So when you talk about like why does God even create the system for homelessness to begin with, I think at that point we're just sort of shifting the argument away from divine hiddenness and more to the problem of evil and suffering. Like why even create a world where there is a need for hiddenness if it's going to help with sanctification? Well, that's a whole different argument. It has to do with the idea of evil and suffering. Now, if that's the case, we're not even really talking about divine hiddenness and how it would be incompatible with Christianity. I think given the Christian worldview as an internal critique here, there really is no issue. And it really just comes across as just sort of the opposite of arguing from religious experience, which I also find is equally unconvincing. It's going to help with sanctification. Well, that's a cool point.
What I prevented the need for that type of work of redemption in the first place, and none of that would have violated freedom. I see no reason to think why you wouldn't have cognitively robust belief, because ostensibly, if
Okay, and then he's also saying the need for hiddenness. So I think this is an external critique, I think.
the fall hadn't happened, Adam would have had cognitively robust belief. So I just that's some of the reasons why I find these types of answers unsatisfactory.
So yeah,
a world without an initial covenant of works, I was omniscient, omnipotent, and we shouldn't support most of them, right? That to me seems like a strange type of response, especially, and this is my last sentence. I know you'll have 100 things to say about this, and especially if I was omniscient, omnipotent, and the creator of the society, such that I could have created the society from the very get-go that there was no such thing as homelessness to begin with. Right? So it seems to me that part of what your answer also does is it's starting 100 miles downstream after the fall, after sin, after all that kind of stuff, when we could go back and say, okay, but God could have created a world without an initial covenant of works, without a tree of knowledge of good and evil. He could have stopped Satan from coming down and tempting them. He knew that was going to happen. Right? He could have done all these things that would have prevented the need for um, that type of work of redemption in the first place.
It seems like he's saying sanctification, basically. Work of redemption is the same thing as sanctification, it seems like. This, I think, is a separate argument. Could have prevented the need for sanctification. It seems like he's saying maybe his argument is like, why would he do that? Like, why? My question to Tyler would then be like, what would be the point of preventing the need for sanctification? Like, it seems like he's saying the need for sanctification is incongruent with something. But what is it incongruent with? The love of God? My question. Point two. What is what would be superior to the need of sanctification? And why would it be superior? And then also, what is... Oh, he's saying cognitive... What's cognitively robust theism again? Because I think he's granting cognitively robust theism as God's ultimate goal. So I think he's saying this. Well, then, like, what would I say? What would be my response if someone asked me that? Because I think I would tend to agree with Tyler. If cognitively robust theism is just realizing your weakness through God, you could have this through suffering. You could also have this without suffering. It depends on what they mean by weakness. What did he say?
And none of that would have violated freedom. I see no
I really need to figure out what the heck cognitively robust theism, because I don't know if that is. It would depend on what they mean by weakness. Because if they mean like your lack of like perfectness compared to God, then your lack of perfectness compared to God, then you could still do this without a bunch of that stuff. But maybe is his argument but it seems like sanctification is necessary for cognitive something. I don't know.
No reason to think why you wouldn't in the first place. That type of invented the need for um, that type of work of redemption in the first place, and none of that would have violated freedom. I see no reason to think why you wouldn't have cognitively robust belief, because ostensibly, if the fall hadn't happened, Adam would have had cognitively robust belief. So I just that's some of the reasons why I find these types of answers unsatisfactory.
So yeah, interesting points. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my camera. I tried to reset it. I don't know. So when you talk about like why does God even create the system for homelessness to begin with, I think at that point we're just sort of shifting the argument away from divine hiddenness and more to the problem of evil and suffering. Like why even create a world where there is a need for hiddenness if it's going to help with sanctification? Well, that's a whole different argument. It has to do and more to the problem of evil and suffering. Like why even create a world where there is a need for hiddenness if it's going
Okay, I think I know how Tyler responded to this. So Michael's now saying
to help with sanctification? Well, that's a whole different argument. Find hiddenness and more to the problem of evil and suffering. Like why even create a world where there is a need for hiddenness if it's going to help with sanctification? Well, that's a whole different argument. It has to do with the idea of evil and suffering. Now, if that's the case, we're not even really talking about divine hiddenness and how it would be incompatible with Christianity. I think, given the Christian worldview as an internal critique here, there really is no issue, and it really just comes across as just sort of the opposite of arguing from religious experience, which I also find is equally unconvincing.
um if Tyler's saying this, which I don't know if he is, a world A world with hiddenness does not seem to best achieve cognitive the robust theism as much as a different world without hiddenness, as well as all these other things. Okay, it does kind of seem like he is arguing that if this is his argument, it does seem like he's kind of arguing with what my other argument is, which is sort of similar. Which is just if you think about what God's greatest desire is, the world as we see it, which includes a lot of hiddenness and other things, does not seem to be what you would expect. But you could just take away all the other things and just say hiddenness isn't what you would expect. But when he says something like he could have created it differently, like God could have created the world where hiddenness. Well, I guess there's two arguments. There's two things you could do. Two ways you could argue, I think. One is hiddenness doesn't get God to his goal in this world, a world with, and then also say hiddenness is inferior to other worlds could imagine in getting God to his goal. Which it seems like he's more so saying this, I think. And it seems like, which I don't know if this would still be part of the argument of divine hiddenness, but it seems like Michael only thinks that number one is an argument for divine hiddenness, and so when he goes to number two, he's getting away from the argument, which I might agree with. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what Tyler would say. Like, would he? Because he's not just saying that. I think he also would agree with one, but like. I think number two. Would he? I mean, I think he would also say two is part of the divine hidden argument. But would I agree with that? A world with hiddenness. To a world without hiddenness. Because then you are changing a lot of other things, I think. I think it would be a separate argument. and I guess maybe to be more precise, you'd be saying with hiddenness and the state of man, maybe. A different state of man. I think this would be a separate argument because you do need, in order to do 2, you have to also include the other things. So yeah, I would think I would agree. That is a separate argument for sure. For sure. Do I want to eat? Yes, my food is ready. I do. So excited. I'll be right back. Oh my goodness. This is canned chicken. It's very hot right now, so I can't really. I can take like little bites, but can't eat a lot at once. Okay, so it's canned chicken, right? 2 cans, which is 88 grams of proteins and cheese. I think it's like 5 grams maybe, which would be 15. So already at 100 grams protein. And 2 slices of bread. Okay. This is about to be bust. Like, oh my gosh. I feel bad for Loki though. Can't get this quite good. Alright. Where did I put the headphones?
Saying, the Christian runs up and says, Jesus is revealed himself to me, believe in him. The non-Christian runs up and goes, Jesus hasn't revealed himself to me, don't believe in him. It's not really an objective argument beyond just personal justification. And I think given the world that we have and the Christian worldview, that hiddenness is necessary to some degree and in certain ways. Now, if you want to shift and just say that, yeah, the hiddenness isn't an argument more, shift more to talking about evil and suffering, sure, that's fine. But I was under the impression we were going to talk about hiddenness itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I should say,
Maybe he's going into suffering as well. But he's not just getting rid of hiddenness. Unless, did he say he is as well, or
we're talking about evil and suffering? Sure, that's fine. But
yeah, it's evil and suffering as well, not just evil and suffering. So.
I was under the impression we were going to talk about hiddenness itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I should say, I think hiddenness and suffering are actually 2 sides of the same coin. But I don't think that I've moved into suffering, right? So the issue, so at least I don't think I've done it illegitimately, right? One of the things that I find in theodicies and answers to divine hiddenness is that it's the bump in the rug, right? Once one pushes down, it pops up over in suffering. And so you say, okay, well now we're getting over this problem of suffering. I'm saying, okay, fine, but that seems to be the correlate, right? So if I push down this objection to hiddenness, well, sure, it becomes a problem of suffering, but that's because like hiddenness is only a problem because there is suffering, and so it seems that there's no escape then from that.
Interesting.
Right? So if the problem of divine hiddenness is answered because it is part of this answer to the problem of suffering, well, if I say, well, there didn't have to be suffering in the first place, and that's why there didn't need to be hiddenness in the first place, it seems an illegitimate response to say, oh, well, now we're shifting to suffering, because I'm really just answering the answer that you gave to hiddenness.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is this is fine, but if you're saying, like, why does hiddenness need to exist? And I go, well, there's an issue of suffering. Then you go, why is suffering? I mean, sure, we can have that conversation here. And I think there's many more reasons as to why. So, for example, if that's what you're arguing, I want to ask a simple question. Have you read Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
Have you read The Adventures of Tom Bombadil?
No.
So I think that's an important point there. I think that people kind of miss. We talk about people voting with their feet. Talk about people, how their actions speak louder than words. And for some reason, humans really, really do like stories where there is triumph, where there is good versus evil and there is triumph. This is why we don't watch reruns of the Teletubbies and we read stories like Lord of the Rings, or we go see popular movies like Sound of Freedom, for example, because we want to see that. We like this idea of that there being a world where there is evil and suffering, but good ultimately triumphs over it. That is the Christian story. And I think ultimately we may say that it would be better for a world without evil, but we ultimately have our actions that speak louder than words. And we are constantly, every day, choosing stories, choosing worlds that do have evil and suffering, but with that, the idea that good ultimately overcomes and defeats it. Why wouldn't God prefer the same? A world with triumphant evil is going to be a maximally good world, but you can't get triumphant evil without there being actual evil, or triumphant good, I mean, without there actually being evil to overcome. So I think from God's perspective, and he can create a world where if he wants to create a maximally good world, he's going to create a world with triumphant evil. And if he's going to create a world with triumphant evil, then he's going to create a world where there needs to be evil to be overcome. But that's the Christian story. It's this long story where there is evil, there is suffering, but it's ultimately overcome. And for all those who become his children, all of that is turned into aspects of their own sanctification and triumphant good in that regards. So if we have this idea of a world,
how is he saying it?
It's not
evil triumphant good or something?
From God's perspective, and he can create a world where there to be louder than words. And we are constantly, every day, choosing stories, choosing worlds that do have evil and suffering, but with that, the idea that good ultimately overcomes and defeats it. Why wouldn't God prefer the same? A world with triumphant evil is going to be a maximally good world, but you can't get triumphant evil without there being actual evil, or triumphant good, I mean, without there actually being evil to overcome.
So my question would just be why? Like, to that statement? Because the reason why good overcoming evil is superior in a movie to us is because it's something we relate to and we experience a lot of evil in our lives, and we would prefer if we ourselves were to overcome the good, because evil is already in our lives. So to separate it, if we could just separate our lives and we had no evil, the only reason we would just, I think personally, if we were just in a situation of bliss, there's no evil or anything in our lives, we would prefer stories about bliss because it's something we relate to. I don't think we would prefer stories with evil being overcome by good because we'd cringe at the evil that is in the stories. If you could separate us from evil, and evil was never in our lives in the first place, I think. Like, if we knew what evil was, but it wasn't something that we experienced in our lives, like, I don't think it would be good. It's only good because that's what we experience. So that's why I don't think the movie analogy works, because that's part of why he would argue that. That would be his answer to the question why. But I'm curious what his other responses would be.
I think from God's perspective, and he can create a world where if he wants to create a maximally good world, he's going to create a world with triumphant evil. And if he's going to create a world with triumphant evil, then he's going to create a world where there needs to be evil to be overcome. But that's the Christian story. It's this long story where there is evil, there is suffering, but it's ultimately overcome. And for all those who become his children, all of that is turned into aspects of their own sanctification and triumphant good in that regards. So if we have this idea of a world with suffering, I don't think that's inconsistent with God, because there are, I would say, given all things, that a world with triumphant evil is going to be far better than a world with just good. I'm sorry, I keep saying triumphant evil. I mean triumphant good.
Yeah, I mean, my first cheeky response is going to be, I also really enjoy reading Camus and Coetzee and Paul Auster and other, the kind of these deconstructionalist literature that don't have any of that, right? So but I take your point. I know the literary example that you're trying to give.
That's fine. So he says his initial response is that he likes stories with just good, whereas not necessarily triumphant good, but just good by itself. But he's saying that's his initial response, so he's about to say what he actually thinks. But that was his initial response, which, like, yeah, those stories are good, but they're not nearly as good as, like, you know what I'm saying? Well, not honest here. They're not nearly as good. They still can be good. It just depends on how the story can connect with you and your experience. That's all the stories have power. Like, when you disconnect your experience and you have experience of 0, but you could experience anything, like it's kind of hard to put yourself, like, what kind of movie would you like at that point? I don't know, because you don't have anything to grasp onto, to connect with, if you have no experience, you know?
I guess part of me then would say, well, or ask, I guess then, do you think that ultimately the explanation for hiddenness and then maybe indirectly evil just is that it makes for a better story?
Well, no. I think that's a part of it, but I think there's more. I think it makes for better soul building, better characters.
Better characters? Okay. Dude, I'm typing this chart with one hand over here. Better characters? Would it? No, it would not. I would much rather be a character with, like, if you think about you personally, there's 2 responses, right? Or 2 things to consider. What would I prefer, and what would God prefer? I would significantly rather just be a perfect character than go through trouble, right? The trouble sucks while you're going through it. Why not just have all the upside with it, no downside? Like, it does feel good to overcome bad, but it would just feel way better if you were just always good. If you were just perfect goodness with no bad. Because the only bad that you could think about there, or why that would be inferior, would be the fact that it's, like, boring, or it would be some sort of lack of goodness there. But if you're in perfect goodness, then there is no lack of goodness. It's kind of hard to imagine, but, like, you can imagine it, I think. And then what would God prefer? Like, think about what state are we in where we're best able to please God. It's a state of perfection when we're able to glorify Him the most. So why would we not just always be in that state? Because then God will be maximally glorified, versus when we're in our state of not giving God glory. Like, I don't think He experiences more glory as a result of us getting better. I mean, He does experience more glory when we're better, but, like, I think He would just experience more glory if we were always good. Hence why He didn't create us, or why it would make sense why He created us in a state of perfection, because that's just clearly better. Okay. What else?
So this is something I talked about in my video, The Problem of Suffering, a Christian Response. I introduced a concept I have called the law of triumph, where God imbues a law in the universe that if any creature encounters suffering, it can be used to build a more good. And so I also think it has to do with building virtuous creatures, building good creatures over time. So we would say Frodo in Lord of the Rings is far more interesting after he goes through his big long experience, rather if he just would have stayed in the Shire and had tea every day. He actually has experienced courage. He's experienced compassion. He's experienced overcoming obstacles, and that.
It's funny he says the word. It's funny he says the word interesting there because that is the whole point. It's more interesting because we relate to it. It's boring when we don't relate to it. Like there's just more. There's more going on there. Like if I was to see someone have my life story, but like do a bunch of cooler stuff, it'd be super cool, way more interesting than someone who I didn't relate to at all. And I would be like, oh, I'm kind of bored here. I'm not connecting in any way to this.
That creates for far better soul building, far more children of God-like creatures, because now we have expanded our knowledge of virtue. We've expanded our knowledge of aspects of existence in various ways. So it's going to actually give us the soul building that would actually turn us into worthy sons of gods and daughters of gods, is what I would say. So it's not just telling a good story. I think that's part of it, because I think triumphant good is maximal good, and it's worthy of celebrating and worthy of creating. But also, I think it has a lot to do with soul building as well.
I guess though, I mean, you'd have to. I mean, okay. Well, I guess I should orient this because I don't actually know your position on this. I have a hunch, but are you a universalist, like not a hopeful universalist, like an actual universalist?
I am no, I'm a legal universalist in that I believe that the only people in hell are the people who choose to be there. So everyone is in heaven who wants to be there. The only people in hell, and also I'm a eventual annihilationist in that I believe that hell is the process of annihilating souls out of existence.
So then, to that regard, though, then soul building seems to create a lot of. Oh, you're back. You're not hidden anymore. We were suffering, but now you're no longer hidden.
Yeah, I'm a big knack for production back here, so I was back here grinding my teeth the whole time Mike was hidden.
I fixed it. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it, buddy.
Because it seems to me then that in order to have the soul building of a narrow is the road and broad is the path, right? It seems to have the soul building for a narrow. There's a sure an awful lot of collateral damage to get there.
So I'm confused.
All right. This is just too OP a meal to just not do every day. Chicken and cheese and bread. Ready for the macros for this joint? It's too good. 107 grams of protein, 29 grams of fat, and 55 grams of carbs. 900 calories. So I have, let's say I was trying to stay at 2,000. I'm at like 2,500 is kind of what I stay around. But if I was at 2,000, I would, I could eat 1,100 calories and get half the protein and still be fine. And hit all my goals. Like, bruh. Half the protein, bruh. That's nice. That's nice. I might as well just keep eating chicken because that joint is dense and it's pretty tasty if you can make it tasty. Like, I can maybe add some butter in there. Or add some salt. Bruh. Bon appetit, if you will.
On what the argument is. Is it just the amount of suffering that's the
I didn't
problem?
even add any salt in that, John.
No, I'm not even talking about suffering. So it seems to be that again,
Wait, what? I missed it.
So I'm confused on what the argument is. Is it just the amount of suffering that's the problem?
No, I'm not even talking about suffering. So it seems to be that
That's funny. So it seems like Michael just accepted the fact that he's talking about suffering, and this dude's still trying to stay on divine hiddenness. He's like, all right, I guess I'm down to talk about suffering, like, whatever.
Again, I'm trying to stay on hiddenness and not move into suffering. Again, it's hard because they're entirely interwoven. But
that's fine. Yeah,
God,
that's fine.
God, like every single person could have a Damascus Road experience. right? It seems I could think of lots of
What is a Damascus Road experience?
trivial ways that atheists wouldn't exist, right? They still might believe. They still might believe for the wrong reasons. They still might, whatever it is. But I mean, I can think of all kinds of trivial ways where God could make Himself known, and there might not be so much collateral damage. Like, I can attest. If I had a massive experience, I wouldn't have apostatized. I know lots of people who would be very happy. Whatever you think of non-resistant non-believers, and I actually think there's a biblical case to argue that if you believe in the inspiration of the Bible, that there is no such thing as a non-resistant non-believer.
Wow, I instantly got into a state of like, I'd be happy with just chilling, not like sitting down, chilling on my phone or something after eating. It puts you in a comatose state, bro. It's tough to get out of. But we're gonna fight through.
Right? Because that just that is what that sin in the fall is. But it seems to me that in order to say that the soul building is there, you have to be able to have some type of answer for the billions of people who have died without that soul building whatsoever. And maybe that's what you're getting.
It seems like he's just saying, what is your rationale for the who are excluded from the theodicies? Theodicics? It seems like he's also saying kind of like in order for Michael's argument to work, he would need to say that the exact amount of suffering is necessary. Of suffering and lack of and hiddenness is necessary for completing God's goals, and there is no way around it. I think he would agree with both of these two things.
Getting out with your Hebrews reference, although I would disagree with that exegesis of that passage, that somehow there's like this second chance of angelism after death where Jesus comes to them, right? I mean, are you like, do you lean towards that, like that second chance after death of it?
Yes, I've been an advocate that there is. I've been an advocate that the post-mortem salvation is definitely plausible and probably does happen.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that would be an interesting conversation, because I find that not to be convincing from the passages normally adduced for it. But so then at that point, I guess you would then say, if I'm understanding you right, well, there's soul building in the actual, like in like, it's all the actual world before the eschaton, right? There's soul building for those who get their soul building here. After death, there's this second chance appearance of Jesus. So really divine hiddenness is only an issue like this side of the veil, but it doesn't actually prevent salvation on the other side, because everyone knows that Jesus, is God, exists, and therefore, and they're based on their belief after that. I mean, am I representing that right? The way you think is again, I'm not saying that you like affirm this jot and tittle as part of it, but it's plausible.
See, I think we look through to the other side, to borrow the line from, I believe it's Alice in Wonderland, through a mirror darkly. I mean, we can only speak of bits and pieces of it. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I can be agnostic about it, so I'm not entirely sure what to say about that kind of idea.
Okay. It seems to be a way, kind of a rescue, if there's this kind of second chance from divine hiddenness, late, after death type of thing. That might be a solution for it.
Well, I don't know if I'm saying that there's that aspect. I'm saying that, look, even if there are non-resistant non-believers, just look at what Jesus says in John 15:22. If they had not known, then they would not be guilty. But now that I have come, they have no excuse. Well, if there are people that have excuses, you guys got nothing to worry about. I mean, you guys actually have an excuse. So, I mean, Jesus sort of sets this thing down. Romans 5:13, sin is not counted where there is no law, even though sin abound. So this idea that God is not going to judge people based on the fact that they may not have known about the law or they may not have actually had the proper evidence. So if there are non-resistant non-believers, then they have an excuse. As C.S. Lewis said, honest rejection of Christ, however wrong, shall be forgiven and healed.
I guess that would cause more problems, I would think, right? So do you ever watch Doctor Who? Have you ever seen Doctor Who?
No.
You should. So it's a fantastic show. I love Doctor Who. There's this episode where
I'm refusing to watch it just so when people hear I don't watch it, I enjoy the reaction more than I could probably ever enjoy a show.
Oh, I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm just going to say you should. It's great.
This is still not they're talking now about suffering, it seems like. But they're talking about only suffering in the sense of hell. So it still doesn't answer the suffering that exists outside of hell. How that's not necessary. I mean, I guess I'll go into it just in case it's helpful. It seems like Michael's saying they're without excuse. No hell. They don't know.
But
more than
problems there.
13 cynics, then they would not be. Look at what Jesus says in John 15:22. If they had not known, then they would not be guilty. But now that I have come, they have no excuse. Well, if there are people that have excuses, you guys got nothing to.
At that point, that you would have every impetus to not engage in evangelism. Like it seems to me that built into that idea, that kind of that reading of Romans 2, where people are only condemned if they're actually aware of the law, if they're aware of it, and there's no condemnation where there's a law. It seems at that point that you would have every impetus to not engage in evangelism. Then I would actually present an opposite problem. I would say, man, God really kind of screwed the pooch then by showing up at all. Like, he should have stayed as hidden as possible. Kind of a Doomsday, divine hiddenness is divine mercy. Like, he should have stayed as hidden as possible, because then people wouldn't be condemned for rejecting Jesus. Right? It seems that actually God showing up has condemned more people.
Okay, so this would make sense, I think, if when Michael says don't know, he means that they honestly don't believe it, versus if you hear it and don't believe it. That's different. Because if you would say if they hear it, then yeah, this would make a lot of sense to say that. But if people honestly reject it, then maybe it would still make sense to evangelize. But then on the flip side, if you hear about people who hear about it, believe it, and still reject it, so it's sort of like a dishonest rejection maybe of some sort, then that would make sense to not evangelize. So that would be the only people who would be saved. those who don't know, those who hear, don't believe, honestly, and then those not safe would be those reject dishonestly. So for that reason, yeah, it would make sense to not evangelize.
Then his not showing up there.
So two things I want to say about that. I anticipated this. Two things to say about this. For one, I'm an outspoken post-millennialist.
Wait, he anticipated this conversation to happen? I feel like this is so diverged from hiddenness. This literally has nothing to do with hiddenness now. They're talking about something completely different. How the frick did he anticipate this to happen?
That I believe that the church age is supposed to bring about a new Eden. So we should go out and evangelize because Christianity will make the world a better place. And there's a lot of data to support this. Robert Woodbury's work on Christian missionary activity, where he actually ran a model of regression, showed that where Christian missionary activity happens, we see more democracy, colonial form, more education, better living standards. Tom Holland's book Dominion shows how Christianity led to the abolitionist movement, led to the idea of abusing children being wrong, created such a wonderful world. And so we should be spreading this if it's actually really good for us. Second, I would be given an Aristotelian response that Christianity is eudaimonia. It is the best way to live. It is the relationship with God would be better for everyone. So why wouldn't we evangelize if we think this is going to improve everyone's life overall? It's better to actually give.
This seems like he's saying the same thing. What was the difference between 1 and 2? Makes the individual better? Maybe? It seems like in both situations he's saying it makes the world and the individual better. But maybe say individual in the first one. If that's not what he's saying, if that's not the difference, I have no idea what the difference is.
Give people more information. If it's going to create a better world, it's going to create better lives for them. And ultimately, Christ ultimately also commanded it. If an omniscient deity tells us to do this, I think we have good reasons for trusting him because he can look into the future and see what is actually going to.
I would agree with his third thing. Makes the individual better? I think that's individual dependent. You have no idea. Maybe there's research on average, but I don't. It's kind of hard because it's like not the like you can't isolate Christianity as a variable. Certainly in those studies, there's no way they isolated Christianity as a variable in of itself. Like the community that comes with Christianity is probably what makes it better. Like if you isolate all the variables and just do like the belief, the honest belief in God, but like say people are getting all the things that come with that, but without the honest belief in God, their lives are probably the same. Like maybe their lives are slightly better with like hope, because now they have like hope, I guess. But then if you use the hope, then you can just also say the other religions that also give the hope, you'd be fine. Like, and this is still like on average, because like individuals definitely you have no idea. Like if you grant an initial, unless like the research is like super strong, like super high quality good research, and it's like 95% or something like that of individuals' lives are improved by Christianity versus the alternative. Like then maybe you could justify the conversion of someone else, or if this is like the only goal. But I don't know. I have no idea about this. My feeling is that it makes zero difference. That's my feeling. It makes no difference, and it makes like maybe right now it would make a difference because like it's hard for people to find community and the things that come with Christianity without Christianity. Like it's hard to find that, even though that is out there. It's hard to find that, and so maybe like right now because of that, it would be hard. But it still wouldn't be the Christianity, it'd be just because of the stuff that comes with Christianity. Um, but even then, like if you grant that is true, um, like maybe it would make sense to evangelize. But I think it would also just make sense to uh evangelize the things that come with Christianity and not necessarily Christianity, like community, like you're like telling them, evangelizing it like in a way, not really, but like about the community that they could have.
Be better for people. So I think there are multiple reasons we should still evangelize.
Yeah, I think there, I would push back on both points. I would say one of those is kind of a chicken and egg scenario. I mean, I grant that Christianity has brought great things into the world, right? But the question is it the Christianity that's coming that's improving the cultures, or is it Western civilization that's coming that has created a bunch of, there's that question of what actually is going. Now, Christianity has had positive influence on things like
Western what?
slavery. There's that Western civilization that's coming that has created a bunch of, there's that question of what actually is going. Now, Christianity has had positive.
He clearly disagrees with this. What is Western civilization doing? Isn't Western civilization constantly changing? What do you mean? Oh, I guess he's saying like in the studies that he's referencing, there's also a switch towards Western civilization um, and Christianity, like sort of at a similar time. That's why he's saying that maybe.
Positive influence on things like slavery, right? So there's that. But when it comes into quality of living,
it's a little too historical for my taste.
A lot of improvements come around by having institutional educational systems, by having better science and medical systems, by understanding about how washing hands helps, right? One of the best things that missionaries did when they traveled the world is they brought hand washing places. There's a lot of the benefit and the improvement of quality of life isn't. The correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation.
It's funny looking at Michael's reactions right now. He's so like excited, it seems like, and energetic, like this woke him up or something. And I think that's because he's so researched in this area. So I think he's probably about to tear down any arguments that Tyler says, because it seems like this is something that he's researched a lot.
That'd be my first on that first point. If you want to come back to that in a minute. The second one.
Like he's so ready to respond.
Now I drew a blank. Well, your second one was
Aristotelian, the idea of we need to reach eudaimonia, the best way for us to live. Yes. I would say is Christian life. Yeah.
So then I would say we could almost run like a reverse Bayesian type of maybe not Bayes, but you could run also like a reverse Pascalian, right? You could say, well, sure, maybe it's the case that it's better for, remember, narrow road Christians. Yes, it's the world majority religion, but of world population throughout history, narrow road. especially when you talk about intrinsically, religious, if you're, the church within the church, Israel within Israel, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you'd agree. Not everyone that says that they are Christian was ever saved, depending on your theological view. Some people are going to say that of me, right? So, sure, you have better quality of life of those people who are in pure and genuine relationship with Jesus. But again, the flip side is now you have billions of people that are now condemned because of it, right? So, whereas you would have all of those people, the billions plus
Wait, what happened?
those who are that they are Christian was ever saved, depending on your theological view. Some people are going to say that of me, right? So, sure, you have better quality of life of those people who are in pure and genuine relationship with Jesus. But again, the flip side is now you have billions of people that are now condemned because of it, right? So, whereas you would have all of those people, the billions plus those who are living life with Jesus, all of those people would have had that quality of life in the afterlife, right? Because they wouldn't have been condemned for rejecting Jesus, right? So it seems to me that yes, you have this finite good of a quality of life on this side of the veil, but you have, again, run a Pascalian, you have an infinite amount for these billions and billions of people on the other side, right? So
That's interesting. This is sort of like a Pascal's wager that I think would actually work. What would be the issue with this? I'm trying to think about the issue with it. Oh, reverse Pascal's wager. Oh, well, I mean, let's think about the obvious ones.
How is that?
So, reverse Pascal's wager, this wouldn't work if
Had a better trade-off.
I think it just wouldn't work for a lot of the same reasons that the normal Pascal's wager doesn't work. So so the question is, will evangelizing lead to people potentially going to hell? Yes. But the issue with this is you also, which would be a negative infinity. The issue with Pascal's wager is it deals with infinities, and infinities just don't make sense in arguments. But like the reason part of that wouldn't work is because you'd also have people doing like the positive infinity. So as long as you have the chance of one person getting saved and getting infinite utility, then it would be worth evangelizing the same way that even if you just have one person that does not become a Christian as a result of you evangelizing, you should not evangelize for that reason. And so in that sense, because the infinities are both lead to infinite utility, you both should evangelize and should not evangelize. I think that's why the Pascal's wager should not work. Even if it's like 99% of people will go to heaven or will go to hell, and 1% of people would go to heaven, like you should still evangelize because of the infinite utility that comes with the people going to heaven, and because infinities don't multiply, there's not really like bigger infinities in this sense. Like there is bigger infinities, but not in this sense. Like two people experiencing infinite utility is the same as a million people experiencing infinite utility. And so because of that, you both should evangelize and should not evangelize. No matter how many people are getting saved or going to hell, as long as there's just one on each side. Even if it's everybody except for one person. The entire world and then one person. On both sides, still should both evangelize and not evangelize. And for that reason, it does not work. Because it leads to contradiction, I believe. There's probably a bunch of other reasons why this doesn't work. Let's try to think. What are the reasons that the regular Pascal's wager doesn't work? Oh, you can't control your belief. Well, that would be irrelevant in this. Because you're just doing it for the chance that they do. It does work, but I guess. Oh yeah, the same reason like Pascal's wager wouldn't work is because like in the reverse, maybe you evangelizing them would always lead to them going to heaven. Like, you have no idea, and so for that reason, like, you should. I guess this is sort of like, or the interesting thing about this is you're assuming Christianity to be true, so you're already in that framework. Then does the Pascal's wager work? That's interesting because that's different when you're just doing it from the current world. Because there's just so many things that could be true. Like, the reason Pascal's wager doesn't work is because it's just an argument from possibility. And so if there's a possibility for heaven to be real, then you should believe in God. But like, but if there's also a possibility that heaven's real and the way to get there is by not believing in God, and therefore you should not believe in God. And so that's the interesting thing with Pascal's wager, but that doesn't apply here because you're already assuming the Christian's worldview, I think. I don't know.
So I want to respond to four things you said: the Western civilization versus Christianity, the narrow road issue, billions now condemned. So I guess three things there. So, is it Western civilization or Christianity? I cannot be more direct. It is Christianity, and there are numerous scholars that have pointed out this. Check out Samuel Moynihan's book, Christian Human Rights. There's a great book with numerous authors called Christianity and Human Rights: An Introduction. You can look at, again, Robert Woodbury actually ran a regression model where he actually demonstrated that Christian missionary activity is leading to all of these good things, which comes directly from the Great Commission. Tom Holland's book, Dominion, has gone into numerous ways. Stephen Martin's wrote a little paper like Do Not Sexually Abuse Children, showed how Christians had to come up with new language to condemn the Roman practices of using children for sex and all these things. A lot of what we got here, I mean, this is also Charles Taylor's point in his book, A Secular Age, that Christianity created secularism in itself. And we see there's just so much evidence that Christianity is the biggest pillar to Western civilization. I'm not saying it's the only pillar, but it definitely is the biggest pillar when it comes to this issue. So it definitely is Christianity that is going.
Maybe in helping us get here. How the fuck? Maybe Christianity is the biggest pillar in getting us to this situation, Western civilization. I have no idea if that's true, but like, I can grant that, and still it would not necessarily make sense to spread Christianity. Just because it's the biggest pillar to get us here does not mean it's the biggest pillar in continuing the growth of society and yeah, continuing the growth of society and the individual. And maybe you could argue that it would do that from an inductive way, like it has gotten us this far, so like why not just so why not continue it? Like, I think it's safe to assume that it would continue to grow. And I think you can I don't know, there's probably like research out there, but my guess would be that you could show the individual aspects of Christianity having the impact. You see, how has Western civilization grown? Okay, and then you see, okay, how have those things grown in other societies without Christianity being present? And you can see how those societies tended to grow in sort of more of a Western civilization way, even though Christianity is completely separate, and it's because of the individual things and not necessarily Christianity in and of itself.
Going to this, and I talked about it in my video on postmillennialism called Rethinking the End Times, where I gave a lot of evidence, not just from this, but also from how Christianity was crucial for the development of science and then led to a lot of technology, these types of things. The other issue you talked about is the narrow road issue. Like, there's billions of people that are now condemned. Well, this is, again, from a limited perspective. We don't know how long the timeline is supposed to go on in this case, or what is supposed to happen in the future. This may just be the beginning of human civilization, and it could spur
I guess there was a third argument that I missed.
Says, like, he was asked once the question, why is life not across the whole universe? And he said, well, it may be, and it may be there in time. I mean, he says this universe is going to go on for millions and millions of years. Look at how far we've advanced in just 100 years. We went from not even having planes to putting a man on the moon in what, like 70 years or so? Imagine what we could do in 10,000 years and exploring the universe. And part of my eschatology, even in the post-millennialist sense, is that after the resurrection, it'll be our job to turn.
All right, 51 minutes. I do want to see what his argument was. Tyler's argument. Say these.
maybe not base, but you could run also like a reverse. I guess reverse Pascal travel the world is they brought hand washing places. So
Mhm.
you know there's a lot of the benefit and the improvement of quality of life isn't the correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. So that'd be my first on that first point. If you want to come back to that in a minute, the second one. Oh, now I drew a blank. Well, your second one was
Aristotelian, the idea of we need to reach eudaimonia, the best way for us to live, I would
yes.
say, is the
So
Christian life. Yeah.
so then I would say
Or the interesting thing about this is you're assuming Christianity to be true, so you're already in that framework. Then does the Pascal's wager work? Um, that's interesting because that's different when you're just doing it from the current world. Because there's just so many things that could be true. Like the reason Pascal's wager doesn't work is because it's just an argument from possibility. And so if there's a possibility for heaven to be real, then you should believe in God. But if there's also a possibility that heaven's real and the way to get there is by not believing in God, and therefore you should not believe in God. And so that's the interesting thing with Pascal's wager, but that doesn't apply here because you're already assuming the Christian's worldview. I think. I don't know.
So I want to respond to four things you said: the Western civilization versus Christianity, the narrow road issue, billions now condemned. So I guess three things there. So, is it Western civilization or Christianity? I cannot I cannot be more direct. It is Christianity. And there are numerous scholars that have pointed out this. Check out Samuel Moyne's book, Christian Human Rights. There's a great book with numerous authors called Christianity and Human Rights, an Introduction. You can look at, again, Robert Woodbury actually ran a regression model where he actually demonstrated that Christian missionary activity is leading to all of these good things, which comes directly from the Great Commission. Tom Holland's book, Dominion, has gone into numerous ways. Stephen Martin's wrote a little paper like Do Not Sexually Abuse Children, showed how Christian
then I would
I was talking to a world champion, and I texted him out of the blue because I woke up thinking about him. And I was like, hey, man, I just want you to know, I think you should just win this next championship and cut it. Leave on top. Leave with people being like, man, he could take it again the next year if he wanted to, but he chose not to because he's above the game. And he responded by saying, well, what about the lessons you learned from losing? And that answer pissed me off so much because losing only teaches one lesson, which is to avoid it.
What is up, YouTube? We are here in Las Vegas. For like months we had been in GNC. First year I've been in GNC, so we're like here at this little expo convention with corporate franchises, pitching everything we're going to do for the next year, doing some presentations to franchise owner, corporate owners, all these people. So just having some fun, but trying to train some legs. So this is my first full leg day since I kind of kind of hurt my hamstring, and I'm going to Mr. Alex Hormozy's gym. I was there last time I was here. Nice private little gym. He's been helping me with some stuff with Raw and business and stuff. We chat every now and then. So he's just like owner for a loss.
I was talking to a world champion, and I texted him out of the blue because I woke up thinking about him. And I was like, hey, man, I just want you to know, I think you should just win this next championship and cut it. Leave on top. Leave with people being like, man, he could take it again the next year if he wanted to, but he chose not to because he's above the game. And he responded by saying, well, what about the lessons you learned from losing? And that answer pissed me off so much because losing only teaches one lesson, which is to avoid it.
What is up, YouTube? We are here in Las Vegas for a GNC convention. We were here for this last year. We were like months we had been in GNC. First year been in GNC, so we're like here. It's this little expo convention with corporate franchises, pitching everything we're going to do for the next year, doing some presentations to franchise owner, corporate owners, all these people. So we're just having some fun, but trying to train some legs. So this is my first full leg day since I kind of hurt my hamstring, and I'm going to Mr. Alex Hormozy's gym. I was there last time I was here. Nice private little gym. He's been helping me with some stuff with Raw and business and stuff. We chat every now and then. So I asked him if he wanted to get in the leg workout. He said, fuck it, let's do it. So we're a bunch of old broken men who need a lot of warm up. I'm not going to kill myself because I'm coming off a mild injury. So we're going to do the best I can and have a good workout.
Hey, dude. Daniel.
Hey. What's up?
Make it okay without any fanfare?
Not any problem with that.
Yeah, because we couldn't shame with you.
You couldn't what?
I couldn't bring you to the front door. You're like the help.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
the hell.
Yeah. Yeah, my keys. All right, cool. Let us rock. All right. Hey, Eddie. What's up?
Are we doing an event this week or today?
Yeah. There's one going on right now.
Are you leading it or?
No, the team does it. Yeah, I'll do a Q&A at like 2 o'clock. That's when I told you I had something I had to do too. So I have the Q&A. So we're doing legs?
That's the plan.
Okay. Well, I have a little bit of legs here. We've got the belt squat. We've got this belt squat, which is air, which is pretty cool. Leg press, quad, ham. And then the rest of my leg steps in the other room.
Do you have an elaborate warm up or is it just walking slowly on the treadmill before you go in?
Oh, I never actually walk on the treadmill. I do, I usually do that hip flexor machine that Layla's on.